We're here in the Davos Lounge with Ian Bremmer, president of the Eurasia Group. Ian, we're one day into this conference. What do you think the mood is this year?
It's much more aware of global risk, but it's also much more optimistic. Optimistic because, for example, you have so many more people talking about the uptick in U.S. growth, insourcing of manufacturing, the energy revolution, as opposed to Washington gridlock. You know, we live in New York, and it's overwhelmingly how ineffectual Congress is.
Right.
That's not the perspective you're getting. Overwhelmingly, you saw a sense of partisanship that came out of the Obama speech. That's not the sense you're getting. It was a strong speech, leadership coming from the Europeans here. So that's important. First time that there's been any sense that you have a Japanese government worth anything.
Right.
in recent memory. I mean, in a generation.
And a year ago, when you were here,
Yeah.
people were worried that European governments were going to go into default, that could lead to a global recession.
That's right.
And that hasn't happened.
Well, I mean, the last 4 years of Davos, you've had consistently overstated sense of risks emanating from the developed world. The United States, Europe, and Japan. Europe was the biggest one, and last year when I was out saying that there was no likelihood of Greek exit and it was inconceivable politically the Germans or the ECB were going to allow countries to go, the mood was incredibly negative. And you remember Merkel and Lagarde were sort of the bells of the ball at Davos last year. That's not the case this year. I think there's a general sense that even though Europe is the Eurozone's in a recession and unemployment is at record highs, these aren't good things, but nobody believes that cataclysm is imminent or even on the horizon. So you put all of that together, this is actually a much more upbeat Davos, but it's also Davos that's much more aware that there are lots of things going bump in the night, and is indeed the night. There's a sense that it's very hard to measure how risky the environment is out there.
In terms of the U.S., I mean, what is the picture here? I mean, if you're looking from here back at the U.S., what are people seeing?
From here back to the U.S., I think they're certainly saying that inequality continues to grow, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat in charge, and what are you going to do about that? I think that from outside the United States, people look at the U.S. and say, you know, how even at Davos, with the 2,700 elite of the elite, look at the United States and say so much of your regulatory and legislative process is captured by special interests. Moneyed special interests. We just had an election that went on for a year. We spent $2 billion on it. We have a Supreme Court ruling that says that corporations will be treated as individuals in terms of donations. People outside the United States don't get that. A lot of folks think it shows corruption in the system. It's obviously American rule of law and stability is incredibly important, but there is sort of this question of when are you going to fix or address? When are you going to address campaign reform? We don't even talk about this in the United States right now. When are you going to do that? When are you going to take some of the money out of the system?
Right.
Yeah.
So, is there a sense that we've kind of turned the corner finally here?
I think there is the sense that the world economy has turned a corner. I think the financial crisis is really in the rearview mirror at this year's Davos. But what we have is not a new normal, it's a new abnormal. It's very much not a stable set of affairs where the U.S. is going to have higher unemployment, but now we know how it works. We've emerged from the financial crisis and people don't know the rules of the road. They're worried about a lot of things, whether it's cyber attacks, whether it's the Middle East and North Africa and South Asia exploding, whether it's conflict between China and Japan, not to mention how do you deal with a world order where the most important economy is poor, is authoritarian, is a state capitalist. They don't know the rules of those roads. So I mean, the theme of Davos this year is resilience. Resilience is something you talk about when you realize that life is not the way you thought it was. So the new abnormal is where we are this year.
Okay, Ian Bremmer, thanks for talking to us here in Davos.
My pleasure.